Managing a small team or business comes with a unique set of challenges. With limited resources and manpower, it's easy for things to feel chaotic and out of your control. How can you, as a leader, accomplish your goals while keeping your team engaged, effective, and accountable? This podcast will give you practical strategies you can implement now to lead your team or business to reach its fullest potential. Welcome to the Organizing Chaos podcast with your host, Danny Coleman.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Organizing Chaos, where we talk about small, practical strategies for small teams and small businesses. So if you're a leader, it is extremely important that you have your time well managed. Oftentimes, if you're the owner or even if you're a manager, you might not either have, if you're a manager, you might not have a lot of oversight. If you're the business owner, you have almost none unless it's a corporation where you have shareholders and they may hold you accountable. But a lot of the small business owners that I'm working with are privately owned, family-owned businesses where that kind of accountability really isn't there. So I want to talk a little bit about my system for how I manage my time and how my weekly planning routine goes. I've had a lot of people ask me about this. I think last I checked, it's actually the most popular. Or I did an episode on time management before. It was my most popular episode. And so I figured I'd do another one where I dove into a little bit more detail and talked about a few things. So, as far as time management goes, I probably really wasn't doing anything intentional at all until about like 2014. That's when I started working at home and for the company that I worked at previously to being self-employed. And I remember the reason I started doing it was because I knew that if I wanted to keep this sweet gig of getting to work from my home office, then I had to make sure I was getting everything done. I couldn't let anything slip. And so before that, I don't even know what I was doing with my days. It was like, I knew that there was probably like a few things that I had to be sure I got done that day. But other than that, they lived in my head or maybe on a sticky note. And besides that, I kind of just took whatever the day threw at me, so that when the end of the day rolled around, I didn't feel fulfilled. I felt like I had just, I'd been in a battle and I really hadn't made all that much progress towards what it was that was really important to me or really important to my position, the position that I was holding. So that said, if you're not currently doing something, it might be because you've tried before and it didn't stick. So I had a real big breakthrough when I took my schedule for the first time and realized back in 2014, like I mentioned, when I first started this, when the routine started to just get boring or just didn't seem to be covering all the bases for what I was responsible for, I just started like beating myself into submission. Be like, no, you've got to get back to that schedule. You got to stick with this time, And it was just hard. I just didn't want to do it anymore. It was just the routine just seemed boring to me. And it was at that point that I realized that I can just reinvent my routine. I didn't have to stick with one just because when I came up with it, I thought it was perfect. So every time that I start to feel like my routine has worn thin or where it's not working for me, I'm not getting stuff done like how I want to be getting stuff done, I just reinvent it. And so I've been through so many iterations, it's like software, so many iterations of my routine. Certain things stay, certain things go, and it just kind of keeps evolving. And I've found even before, like there's a time where I kind of circled back to a way I used to do it in the past. So it's not like, it's getting more and more perfect all the time. You just need to adapt it to how what are the responsibilities that you're tasked with during this time? What's going on in your life right now? Most importantly, how do you want your time to be spent, both personally and professionally? I know there's a name for it, but there's that rule, quote unquote, that rule that's like, the amount of work will always be, what is it exactly? Work will always expand to the amount of time allotted for it, or something like that. So I found that that's true too. That if I act on my schedule like 8 to 5 or whatever, that I end up filling all that up, and oftentimes not even with really impactful stuff. So, but I digress. If you're not doing a planning schedule yet, I'm hoping that this will inspire you to try one out. And if anything that I have here works for you, awesome. Please copy it. Otherwise, yeah, it feels really great. I love planning my whole week out. And again, I'm not planning it out so that there's nothing fun that ever pops up or whatever. I'm always allowed to call audibles If I feel like I can get stuff done throughout the whole week by, skimming off a few hours over here, I might shove a few things from one day to the next. But the important thing is just that I'm doing this every single Monday, and that's what helps me stay on track. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. So my weekly routine, actually, it kind of started based on the bullet journal system or concept. And if you've heard of the bullet journal, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, just look it up. But basically, it's just a system for taking, for scheduling, for time scheduling, and I believe note taking. And so there's a few things about this that you may recognize from the bullet journal. I couldn't even point them out to you at this point, except for the symbols that I use, which I'll talk about in a minute. But besides that, it's kind of deviated a bit from that to where it's definitely my own as far as I know. So what I do is I kind of have two different categories of work. So forgive me if the audio kind of goes in and out here a little bit. I'm going to be looking back at my board. And if you're listening to the audio only version of this, I do recommend that you find the YouTube version of it so you can see my board. It's a little bit more helpful to be able to look at what I'm pointing at to help you understand kind of what I'm doing. So, I have two columns. I have the big picture stuff, right? Those are the big rocks. I've talked before about how you have to have big rocks in your business to be able to make progress on the things that are most meaningful and we're really going to move the needle. But then you can't ignore the regular day-to-day work. The regular day-to-day work is always going to be there to some degree. If you're a leader, hopefully you're able to get more and more of this off your plate, but there's always going to be some amount of stuff that you need to make sure you're doing every day or every week or whatever. And if nothing else, if you're managing people, you're at least spending time managing people. And then if you're an owner who's really been able to delegate and you're not even managing anyone except for your general manager, first of all, congratulations. That's the goal I want to get everyone to. But you're still going to have certain things that you want to make sure you're doing every day, or at least every week or every month. With some level of frequency, you're doing something. So that's what the regular work is. So I got two columns. So big picture stuff, regular work. So I start with the big picture stuff. So the big picture stuff lives on a Google document where I have everything kind of outlined for as far as with my business partner, Brian, and we have a vision document, and that's everything we want to get accomplished in that month. And so, and I have a vision document for other parts of my life and business as well. And so what I'll do is I'll look at those things, the big picture stuff, and I take those big picture things and I break them down into what are parts of this big picture thing that I can get done this week, right? And so sometimes that requires a little bit more planning. Usually if you're doing like a vision every month or every quarter, you can break those things down a little bit more. But I take those things from the big picture, those tasks or items from the big picture document, and I pull that into the week, right? So I kind of load it. It's like a hopper. The big picture is the hopper, and I take the stuff out of the hopper and I load it into my weekly schedule every single Monday without fail. Every Monday this will happen. If it doesn't, my week must not exist. I must be taking a week off or something like that. So anyways, by the way, like if you're doing that, if you're taking a day off or whatever, like just don't skip this, right? Whatever days you have to schedule, even if you have a long weekend or something, you don't start till Wednesday, like schedule out the rest of the day. You will feel so much more fulfilled when you knock all that stuff out. So you take the big picture stuff, put it into the weekly schedule, and then I have time slots on my calendar where I am, where project stuff lives, right? So I have time slots for my regular work right here, and I have time slots for project stuff. So all of this gets loaded into certain blocks throughout my week. So for instance, I have on Mondays are a heavy management day for me. So I don't get a lot of project work done on Mondays because I'm spending time making sure that I'm managing the different direct reports that report to me or contractors that I'm working with. I'm making sure that I'm checking in with all of them, that they know what work that's lined up for them that week. That I'm following up on any kind of questions they've asked me, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have some meetings on that day as well, Monday meetings. So I don't usually get a lot of project work done on Monday. However, on Tuesdays at 9:30, project work starts. I have a project block that goes from 9:30 to 11:30. So that is going to be the first time during the week where I'm going to work on some of the big picture stuff, right? And then I have another smaller block of time to take care of the regular work, right? Because I did a lot more of that on Monday. But anyways, I don't want to get overly detailed with this. I'm just kind of giving you an example of how you don't have to have every single day the same for a schedule or a routine to be a schedule or a routine. It can look however you want, so long as you're following some sort of guidelines or rules that, again, because what you're doing is you're having to bring accountability to yourself. So you breaking these rules is kind of like if you've ever played a cooperative game, board game like Pandemic, We were just playing this game the other day with my friends. Actually, Ryan, who's editing this video, is who I was playing with. But the point of the game is, well, you're cooperative. You're all on the same team, but the board has certain rules that you obviously, as the only humans around, have to continue to advance the board eventually towards your doom, and you're having to beat the game. But I won't get into the rules of Pandemic. But the point is you have to hold yourself accountable, right? So any time if we all would have agreed to just like not lose, we wouldn't have lost, right? But that's not the point. You want to create rules and systems that keep you in check. And so that's why you want to have some of this stuff to abide by. So that's the big picture stuff. So hopefully that was fairly simple. You're taking whatever your big rocks are for the month or for the quarter, you're breaking those down into smaller things, finding time slots in your week to put that stuff, and then making sure that those time slots stay consistent on your calendar, again, until you're ready to reinvent your schedule. So that's the big picture stuff. That's most important, right? Because if you're not making progress on the big picture stuff, if you're letting the regular work crowd out your day, you're going to be unfulfilled, you're going to feel beaten up and bruised, and your business or your team is not going to make the long-term progress that they need to make. You only have something, if you fly by the seat of your pants forever, you will have nothing substantial. The only way to build something substantial is to take substantial time and effort and resources directed towards those big things. So then I have the regular work, right? So the regular work also has little time slots on my calendar as well. So I take the regular work and I make sure that it's a recurring event. So regular work goes into the calendar, and then those turn into recurring events. So like I mentioned, on Monday, I have my 9:30 to 11:30 block is dedicated to management stuff. So that's why I said I'm making sure I use Trello. I look at Trello to make sure that the people who I'm working with know what it is that I'm expecting from them. I'm answering their questions. I'm looking to make sure for the upcoming week, stuff like that. Those are the regular things. I also I manage a couple Facebook groups. I take that time to make sure I check in on Facebook. Make sure that, there's anyone who has any kind of certain request or whatever that I've, checked that out, whatever. It's like my regular stuff. Now, what I don't put on the Monday regular work, and this is just kind of like an asterisk thing, is email. I really, really recommend that you put email near the end or middle of your day, because the beginning part of your day, you've probably read this before, for most people, it's the most productive part of the day. Now, if that's not the case for you, then I would flip-flop that. But whatever it is, I would definitely put email in the area where you're like in the part of the day where you're not as productive. Because when you're putting email in the part of the day when you're productive, you're spending your time on a bunch of other people's requests and a bunch of rigmarole and going through spam and promotions and everything else like that. Make sure that whenever you do have your email check-in time, you're putting that in a part of the day where you're least productive. So that way you use your most productive time and effort on the big picture stuff. Because remember, that's what this is all about. It's not just about having a routine or a schedule. It's about having a routine or schedule that pushes forwards on the big projects for you. So that's the big picture stuff, and that's the regular work, and that mostly consists of all that I have. And I also have meeting times, and I try to keep regular meeting days. So for instance, for me, I recently revamped my schedule to make sure that meetings were only happening for me on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays after 2 o'clock, simply because I want to make sure that I'm using all those mornings for every day of the week to really make a big progress on my big rocks and the things that I really want to make sure come to fruition. The meetings obviously are important. You have to have some space for them. And so I push for having them at 2 p.m. and after Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Now that allows me to still be able to accommodate some people's schedules. But remember, if you don't put forward your suggestion first, then other people's schedules and times are going to control you. So that happens all the time, and it's not something that you're doing to be rude or whatever, but it's just, if you say like, hey, can we have a meeting, or I'd like to meet up sometime, when's good for you? And they're like, oh, well, 9 o'clock Monday morning. And you're like, 9 o'clock Monday morning is when I'm really getting stuff done. I really don't want to meet 9 o'clock Monday morning. You have to say that. You need to let them know, what, actually, I've got a policy where I only let myself do meetings after 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, or Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Does any times work there for you? And lots of times people will say yes. Maybe their schedule allows it, or maybe that also happens to be a time where they're open for meetings, or maybe they don't care at all, and that's what they're willing to meet whenever you want to meet. So always make sure that you put forward how you want to interact with people. That's something that I got out of the 4-Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss. It was really good. And I've never, it's always been, it was on my email signature forever. I don't have it on there anymore because I just don't worry about it. But it was, you have to control how people interact with you. And so we would put a lot of the employees that worked at the business that I worked at before, we put, hey, just so you know, basically something to this effect in the signature. Hey, just so you know, I'm not be checking email until after 3:30 every day of the week. So if something really urgent, you can give me a call at this number. Because other people, there's an expectation. And I think it's changing now, hopefully. But there's this expectation that email is like instant communication with people when you need to respond as soon as I send that email and stuff like that. Like that's baloney. Like I would hate to live in a or whatever, work at a company where that was the status quo. But anyways, enough of my tirade about email and whatnot. So again, just to recap, big picture stuff, regular work, and then have some type of format for yourself at which to have meetings so that you are available, but it's in time slots that you can expect it to show up at so it doesn't disrupt your week. Lastly, up here, I'll show you what my rules are. These are the rules that I have in place to make sure that I don't overload myself, but that I also don't, I rarely have to worry about underloading myself, if that's the word. I always am erring on the side of overloading. So really these rules are to keep things in check so that I only plan for work that I can reasonably expect to get accomplished. So what I have here are the first thing up here, if you can see on the board, I have is these squares. These squares are check boxes. These are things that essentially I can do within 5 minutes. It's something that's almost immediately actionable. So, something like, write a check to so-and-so and put it in the mail. Okay, yeah, that can take 5 minutes tops. Write a check out, put it in the mail, stamp in the mailbox. Things like, I don't know, call so-and-so, leave them, or text someone, actually not call someone, that might make a big conversation, right? So text somebody, right? That's something you can just do. If they text back immediately, that's fine. Your objective was just to text them. You can respond to that text whenever later, at some later point. So that's what the checkbox are for. And I do no more than 5 of those per day. And that allows me to make sure that I'm still getting some of these quick work done that doesn't fit into how constrained the rest of my day I might make my day. So for instance, then the next thing I have are if you can see here, I got a P with a circle around it. That's my project stuff, right? So whenever I'm working through my schedule and I'm taking this big picture stuff and putting it on the day, so I'm going to have a mix of these square symbols, these circle symbols with a P in it, the circles without a P in it, and I want to make sure I'm highlighting right there on my iPad. So I use my iPad. You can use paper, however you want to do it. And I'm highlighting right immediately, like here's where you need to put your focus today. This is big picture stuff. And so when your big picture time slot pops up, this is what you're doing. That's the best thing. When you just sit down, you can open up your schedule and be like, what was I supposed to do? Boom. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because I don't know about you guys, but like it happens to me a lot that I might go to the bathroom, I go to lunch, come back, have a meeting, phone call, and I get back and I'm like, okay, what was I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be doing right now? And then when you can just look at something when you planned, when your brain was in planning mode earlier that week and it said, this is what you need to be doing during this time. It's so fantastic. I mean, it makes work so much easier when you have it like that. And then last year I got the circles with the circles with no P in it. And I give myself 2 of those. Those are events, right? Circles are events. So this is some of the stuff that hails from the bullet journal system. So I can have a maximum of 5 quick tasks per day, 4 project-oriented items, and then 2 events. Now, I will say that depending on how heavy I think certain projects might be, I might not go all the way up to 4. If I think that it's going to be something that's really time intensive, I might just stay at 3 or whatever. If I also have an event heavy day, then I'm also going to probably err on the side of keeping the projects at a lower, either at 4 or definitely at 4, but like maybe lower than 4, like 3 or something like that, if I have an event heavy day where I'm having lots of meetings. So you have to kind of evaluate what works for you, but always err on the side of underscheduling yourself because your brain is always going to try to overschedule yourself. So if you err on the side of underscheduling yourself, you're probably about right where you should be. There was my business partner mentioned to me one time, I think he got this from his coach, and I think it's super good, is that once you feel like you can fit a little bit more into your day, that's when you need to stop, because without fail, everything that you plan for, your day is likely not to go exactly according to all that. So make sure that you plan for slack, have some time in there, fill up your day 75, 80% max. And do the same thing with your week, 75, 80% max, because you want to make sure you have that bandwidth for the unforeseens that are going to come up, and the fact that probably some of the projects that you're taking on or putting yourself into are going to be a little bit more work than you might have thought. Again, because a lot of projects are new work, so it's something that you haven't done before, almost by its nature. So it's good for you to kind of to plan for a little bit less than rather to overplan. And then when you can look back at your week and see that you accomplished everything you planned for, that you can close the book and feel fulfilled. You can enter into your weekend feeling awesome, or maybe even start your weekend earlier because you got everything done and it's Friday at 12. So anyways, hopefully this stuff. Oh yeah, sorry. And the last thing here, I have 2 bumps max. So this is another thing that's really important, is that a lot of times we'll put stuff on our schedules or we'll plan for something and it's really not as important as we think it is. But we say immediately, we're like, oh yeah, that's something that's really important. I need to make sure that I do that. Well, the reality is that you think it's important right then and there, but it might not really stay that important. And so I let myself bump something. If I don't accomplish something during a week, I'm allowed to bump it 2 more times, right? So I can bump it. So let's say week 1, I have it on my schedule to get done. I don't get it done. I bump it to week 2. It gets to week 2, I still haven't completed it. I can bump it 1 more time. If I've not completed it still by then, it obviously is not important if 3 weeks passed and it didn't get done. But that happens a lot. There's different things that you might feel in the moment is really important, and then once your week gets done and you realize that somehow your brain has decided to deprioritize that, it either is procrastinating, which means that pain will eventually bring it back into your life, or it's not really that important. And the reason you're procrastinating is because you knew that it really wasn't that big a deal. So those are some things that I find really helpful. I'll give you another bonus tidbit. I don't know if you are into using your reminders app at all on your iPhone, but I used to be really, really bad about giving myself reminders throughout the day that would pop up, and it would be outside of my schedule, and it would disrupt the schedule that I had. Or I would just find that things would just pile up in my reminders app and I'd never end up checking them off. So one thing that I do is that when I'm doing this scheduling time, and I do this every Monday, no later than 9:30 a.m., when I have things that come to my mind throughout the week that I'm like, ooh, that's something that's important, or I should look into doing that, but I know it's going to take more, my schedule's already been planned for, then I'll tell myself, I'll just say, hey, SIRI, I don't want to say her name out loud or she'll activate, but remind me at 9:30 a.m. on Monday morning to do XYZ. So that way, when I'm going through all my scheduling and whatnot, I can also have another little category of the things that I thought throughout the week. And I can look to say, okay, yeah, that is still important. I want to go ahead and load that into my week as well. So that's what that 9:30 a.m. Monday morning time is for me. It's when I get everything that's supposed to happen that I either thought up myself or comes from my vision document or comes from the regular work that I'm required to do. I take all of that and I plan that all out in a week, and it's just fantastic. I really don't know how I'd get anything else done without it. A lot of people depend on what I do because I'm an integrator type. And so I do a lot of management and whatnot. And so I feel very responsible for the fact that I've got to make sure that if I've made promises or made commitments, or that I'm in charge of a certain project or a certain initiative, that I can't let that stuff slip. And that's what this does for me. It really helps me stay accountable to myself, so that way I can provide the consistency that people have come to expect from me. So anyways, I hope that this was helpful to you in some way or another. It's been a huge help for me. And again, I hope that maybe something in here will inspire you to, if you're not already doing your weekly planning, to start doing it, and to really see the benefits of giving something like this a go. If you're going to give it a shot, I promise you, if you give yourself at least 2 to 3 weeks on it, just commit to 2 or 3 weeks. You'll see the difference. Don't feel like after 1 week it's got to get perfect, or if you've not accomplished everything, you must not be good at it. You got to stick with it for at least 3 weeks, and you'll see the benefits, I promise. So anyways, if you have any questions, or you would like to talk to me, or you would be interested in being interviewed on my podcast, you have something to share with my audience, I'd love to hear from you. You can shoot me an email, danny@dannycoleman.me. And you can follow me on Instagram at I am Danny Coleman. I'm also on Twitter. And yeah, I hope that you guys are doing well. I will make it. I don't think I ever really talk about this, but hopefully you are aware of the fact that I'm a small business consultant here in Murray County, specifically Columbia, Tennessee. If I am looking for another 1 or 2 clients. If you are interested at all in working with me, I'd love to meet up with you, grab coffee, grab a drink, whatever. Let's talk and see what I can do to help you with your business. So again, again, you can also shoot me an email, danny@dannycoleman.me. Again, and if you guys have any time and you're able to give me a review on iTunes, I really do appreciate that. 5-star reviews are really appreciated, but I would take any kind of honest feedback. You guys are great. Thank you again for tuning in. I will see you later.
Want more? Go to dannycoleman.me to download Danny's free small business hiring guide, which includes tips, templates, and tools, plus a step-by-step process you can use to find and keep high-quality employees for your small team or business.